The isolation of the Teran Republic. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, the Teran Republic was an enigma, an isolated star nation barely noticed by the greater powers of the cosmos. Far from the central hubs of interstellar trade and diplomacy, the Teran Republic had carved out its own space in the stars, a small but resilient entity that had spent centuries quietly expanding, industrializing, and growing into something far more formidable than anyone had anticipated. Despite their ambitious plans and rapid growth, the Republic had been largely ignored by the larger galactic community. In the eyes of the galaxy's dominant powers, the Teran Republic was an insignificant player, a backwater civilization that had little to offer beyond the minerals in its rich asteroid belts. Efforts to reach out to neighboring star systems had largely been unsuccessful. Some worlds refused to engage with humanity at all, their reasons unknown and their diplomacy closed off. Others simply saw no reason to entertain relations with the fledgling Republic, dismissing its people as nothing more than a curiosity, a species still in its infancy, struggling to stand on its own. But humanity, undeterred by these setbacks, pressed forward with its expansion and self-sufficiency. The Teran Republic's isolation was not born out of a lack of ambition, but out of necessity. Earth had experienced a turbulent period of self-discovery and political realignment, and its resources were stretched thin. Wars had ravaged much of the old world, and the new Republic sought to rebuild its civilization away from the prying eyes of the galactic powers. What had started as a humble outpost grew rapidly, fueled by a drive for self-reliance and an unyielding desire for autonomy. The Terran government knew that if they were to survive in a hostile galaxy, they needed to become masters of their own fate. To achieve this, the Teran Republic embarked on a series of unprecedented social engineering projects, transforming humanity's culture and society on a scale never seen before in its history. The shift was fundamental. Everything from education, governance, to the way families were structured had to change. The idea was simple yet radical. The Republic needed to produce a highly educated, well-trained, and resilient population capable of colonizing distant worlds and establishing permanent outposts across their local star system. This transformation would not only ensure the survival of humanity, but also lay the foundation for a self-sustaining civilization that could stand on equal footing with other galactic entities. For the government of the Teran Republic, the greatest challenge was always how to maintain a unified front across so many far-flung colonies. The logistical feats required to manage this ever-expanding empire were nothing short of monumental. Colonizing planets in the neighboring systems was difficult, yes, but even more difficult was maintaining those colonies. How could they foster a sense of community and loyalty when the people lived so far apart and were so isolated from one another? The answer came in the form of a political and social revolution, a restructuring of the human psyche itself. The Republic began to shape its citizens into a new mold, one that would guarantee both high levels of intelligence and physical resilience. The government, guided by a combination of political leaders and scientific experts, devised a system that combined military discipline, strict education programs, and genetic optimization. Every citizen was part of a larger design, an effort to ensure that humanity could thrive in the most extreme of environments, on the most remote of planets. Children were raised from an early age to be self-sufficient, tough, and resourceful. Every individual was expected to contribute to the greater good, and the emphasis on community and mutual survival was instilled deeply into the fabric of the Teran people. While the rest of the galaxy had grown comfortable in its long-established hierarchies, the Teran Republic was fostering a new generation of humans capable of thriving under the harshest conditions, becoming both the pioneers and the soldiers of their new world. Every adult, every child, had a role to play in this grand design. Those who couldn't meet the physical or mental standards were sent to remote colonies where their tasks were just as vital, though less glamorous. As the years passed, the Republic's efforts began to show remarkable results. Colony ships began to venture beyond their small corner of space, establishing new outposts on distant worlds. terraforming barren planets, and slowly but surely becoming self-sustaining. The strength of humanity, once seen as a weakness in the broader galactic landscape, had now become a symbol of resilience and adaptability. But even as the Republic's power grew, its place in the galaxy remained precarious. The larger galactic states, powerful, established empires that had been in control for millennia, still saw the Teran Republic as an insignificant entity. Its sheer isolation was a blessing and a curse. No one came to the Republic's aid when things went wrong, and no one took its needs seriously. Its strategic importance was still uncertain to the larger galactic bodies. Would the Republic be swallowed up by one of the powerful star empires, or would it continue to stand as an independent force in the galaxy? The Teran Republic was self-sufficient, but it was still vulnerable, its power rooted not in alliances with other empires, but in its own growth, and more importantly, in the revolutionary social programs that had made humanity more resilient than it had ever been. These same programs, however, began to stir unrest. Some factions within the Republic questioned whether the radical shift in human culture was worth the cost, whether a society built on such a strict system of education and conformity could ever truly be free. Yet for now, the Republic was focused on one goal: expanding their reach and securing a place for humanity in the stars. It was clear that their continued survival and future success depended on one thing above all else: the secret knowledge that lay buried deep in humanity's forgotten past. Rumors had begun to spread, whispered among the highest levels of government and military personnel. Ancient artifacts had been discovered, relics that could change the future of the Republic and perhaps all of humanity. What was this hidden knowledge that had been lost to time? And what would it mean for the Teran Republic? Was this the key to finally unlocking humanity's true potential in the galaxy, or would it lead to their downfall? As whispers of these discoveries reached the ears of the Teran leaders, the entire structure of the Republic began to shift. The Teran Republic's future was no longer just about survival. It was about embracing the past to forge a new future, one that would send ripples throughout the galaxy and potentially alter the course of history forever. Unearthing the past. The discovery of the ancient artifacts sent a wave of excitement through the Teran Republic. For years, humanity had focused its efforts on building, expanding, and strengthening their colonies. They had forged a self-sustaining empire on their own terms, but now it seemed that the key to their future lay in their past, a past that had long been forgotten. The discovery of the artifacts sparked a curiosity and urgency in the Republic's leadership. They were no longer simply focused on survival. Now, the Republic needed to understand what had happened before their civilization had even begun, and what that knowledge could unlock. It began with the discovery of a set of metallic discs deep within the caverns of a recently colonized world. At first glance, the discs seemed like nothing more than ancient relics of a long-dead civilization. But the moment the Teran scientists began studying them, the true potential of their discovery became clear. The artifacts weren't just old, they were deeply sophisticated, crafted from materials unknown to any modern civilization. As scientists and archaeologists worked tirelessly to decode the markings inscribed on the discs, the Teran people began to sense that their isolated existence was about to change forever. The markings on the discs were not written in any known language, but rather a complex system of symbols and equations that seemed to have an eerie familiarity. The deeper the scientists dug into the analysis, the more they realized these symbols held the key to something far greater than anything humanity had ever imagined. What they uncovered was a detailed history of a forgotten race that had once dominated the galaxy, a race that had vanished long before the rise of the Teran Republic. This race, known as the Archal, had existed millennia before humanity's first recorded history. Their technology had been incomprehensibly advanced, their civilization a pinnacle of achievement. The artifacts revealed that the Archal had mastered energy manipulation, biological enhancement, and faster-than-light travel. They had built an empire that spanned vast reaches of the galaxy, influencing countless worlds, including the one that would eventually give rise to humanity. Yet despite their vast power and knowledge, the Arkel had mysteriously disappeared without a trace, leaving only remnants of their civilization behind. What was even more fascinating was the discovery that the Terans, unbeknownst to them, were directly connected to the Arkel. The scientists began to realize that the Teran people were not simply descendants of humanity as they had long believed, but rather a product of genetic manipulation by the Arkel themselves. The very genes that made humanity unique, their resilience, their adaptability, their ability to survive in extreme conditions, had been engineered by the Arkel, intentionally shaping humanity to become the ultimate inheritors of the galaxy's future. The revelation stunned the Teran leadership. For centuries, the Republic had prided itself on its independence, its ability to build from the ground up, and to thrive in isolation. They had believed themselves to be a unique force in the galaxy, shaped only by their own actions and decisions. But now, the truth was undeniable. Their entire existence had been orchestrated by a long-forgotten race, and humanity's very nature had been manipulated by forces far beyond their understanding. As this discovery spread throughout the ranks of the Republic's leaders, the implications became clear. The Terans had not only uncovered their past, but they had also uncovered the dark shadow of their true purpose in the galaxy. They had been created as a weapon, designed to outlast and outmaneuver the challenges of a universe that could destroy them. But what was the true reason behind their creation? Why had the Arkel, with all their power and wisdom, chosen to leave behind a race of beings like the Terans? The answers came in waves, as more and more artifacts were uncovered, each revealing new layers of the Arkel's complex history. The Arkel had been a peaceful civilization, driven by a desire to foster harmony and growth across the galaxy. But they had faced a catastrophic event, a war against a race of hyper-advanced, existentially destructive beings that had sought to wipe out all other civilizations in the galaxy. The Arkel, in their desperation, had turned to genetic manipulation, creating new races to serve as their soldiers, their agents in a war they could not win alone. Humanity, the Teran Republic, was the legacy of that desperation. A race of engineered beings designed to carry out the Arkel's will. The Arkel had imbued humanity with the strength to survive, the will to resist extinction, and the intelligence to adapt and evolve. But the war had taken its toll, and the Arkel, realizing their failure, had withdrawn into isolation, leaving the Terans and other engineered species to carry on their legacy. Now the Teran Republic found itself at a crossroads. The revelation of their past was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, they had unlocked the secrets of their origins, understanding their place in the grand design of the galaxy. But on the other hand, they were faced with the terrifying knowledge that they were not as independent as they had believed. They had been part of a larger, hidden agenda, and now they were part of a galactic struggle that was far beyond their comprehension. In the days following the discovery, the Teran government convened emergency meetings to discuss their next steps. The implications were vast. What did it mean for humanity to be the product of another race's design? How would this revelation impact their standing in the galaxy, now that they understood their true origins? Would the rest of the galaxy see the Terans as a tool of the Arkel, or would they embrace them as a force in their own right? The Republic's leaders understood that the time had come to move beyond isolation. They could no longer hide in the shadows of the galaxy, content to remain a small, self-sustained power. The galaxy had already changed, and the Terans were now a part of that change. But the real question was, would humanity stand together to forge its own path, or would they succumb to the weight of their engineered past? The discovery had also unearthed another chilling reality. The Arkel's enemies, the ones who had sought to destroy them, were not gone. The Terans had unknowingly stepped into a cosmic war that had been ongoing for eons, and their survival would depend on their ability to confront this ancient threat. The shifting galaxy. The revelation that the Teran Republic had not only been manipulated by a long-lost race, but also shaped as a weapon for a galactic war sent shockwaves through every level of the Republic. The once proud and independent nation now faced a dilemma unlike anything it had encountered before. Could they continue to thrive as a self-sufficient, isolated power, or would they have to confront the galactic forces that had been orchestrating their rise and existence from the shadows? The days following the discovery were filled with frantic meetings, debates, and strategic planning. The Teran leadership was split. Some argued that they must embrace the new knowledge, use it to assert their place in the galaxy, and prepare for the future, while others, more cautious, feared that acknowledging their true origins would mark them as pawns in a much larger game. There were even whispers that the Arkel's enemies, the ancient galactic predators, had not only left the Terans with a legacy, but also with a duty to fight the enemies of their creators. In the months after the discovery, the Teran government moved swiftly to harness the knowledge of the ancient artifacts. Scientists and historians worked tirelessly to decode the encrypted messages left behind by the Arkel. With every new breakthrough, the mysteries of the galaxy began to unravel, revealing layers of history the Terans had never imagined. The artifacts weren't just a record of the Arkel's civilization. They were a map to the stars, a guide to the many lost races and worlds that the Arkel had encountered, and in many cases, subdued or eliminated. The Terans had been chosen for a purpose. Their genetic engineering was not an accident. They had been crafted to be resilient, adaptable, and strong enough to survive in a galaxy fraught with war and chaos. But with this discovery came a darker truth. The Terans were not the only engineered species. The Arkel, in their desperation to ensure the survival of intelligent life against their foes, had created other races, others like the Terans, across the galaxy. Some had been successful, some had failed. The Terans were not the only legacy of the Arkel's war, and that meant they were not alone in their role in the galaxy's ongoing struggle for survival. The Terans had always known of the great unknowns that lay beyond their home system. They had studied the stars, sent probes to distant worlds, and even sent expeditions into nearby galaxies, but they had never anticipated discovering this kind of legacy. The more they learned, the more they began to see how vast and interconnected the galaxy truly was, how small their existence had been in the grand scheme of things. The truth of their existence had never been fully realized by anyone in the Republic, even by their own leaders. Now, faced with the evidence, they could no longer ignore it. But it was not just the artifacts and the history of the Arkel that had changed the Terans. It was the sudden realization of their own power and the responsibility that came with it. Humanity had always prided itself on its adaptability, its ability to survive against all odds. But now, the Terans were faced with the challenge of reconciling that survival instinct with a sense of purpose that went beyond their isolated corner of the galaxy. Their past was no longer something to hide from. It was a part of them, a legacy they could no longer escape. It was as if the Republic had been waiting for this moment. And now, in the face of their ancestors' mistakes, they had to decide what role they would play in the galaxy. The call for action came sooner than expected. After months of decrypting the Arkel's message, it became clear that the Terans were being watched. The Arkel's enemies, the ones they had fought for eons, were still out there. These galactic predators, who had nearly wiped out the Arkel and their creations, had not forgotten their ancient war. And now, they were seeking to reclaim what they had lost. The first signs of their presence were subtle, almost imperceptible. Small anomalies in the galaxy's dark space, strange gravitational shifts, random energy surges, and inexplicable disappearances of ships and probes. The Terans, still in their isolated corner of the galaxy, had managed to stay off the radar of these predators, but the signs were unmistakable. The war that had decimated the Arkel was far from over, and the Terans had unwittingly inherited their place in that struggle. It wasn't long before the first attack came. A small, unmarked ship entered the Teran system, bypassing all security protocols. It was not a typical assault on their colonies, but it was clear that this was not a random act. The ship was heavily armed, capable of disabling entire fleets without leaving a trace. The Teran military, usually a well-oiled machine, was caught off guard by the sudden appearance of this unknown vessel. It was only after a few tense days of skirmishes and failed negotiations that the Republic realized the scale of the threat. The mysterious attackers were not interested in negotiating or establishing peaceful relations. They were here for one thing: destruction. The Teran leaders convened an emergency council to address the growing threat. The Republic had survived on its own for so long, but now it was clear that they were no longer the masters of their own destiny. The galaxy was waking up, and it was not a friendly awakening. The Terans, for the first time, found themselves on the front lines of a war that they had only learned about through their discoveries of the Arco. To make matters worse, the Terans realized that they were not alone in their predicament. Other engineered races, like the Terans, were scattered across the galaxy, left to fend for themselves in the aftermath of the Arcal's war. Some of these races had already been absorbed into galactic powers, while others remained hidden in the far corners of the galaxy, just as the Terans had. What the Republic needed was not just survival, but unity. They had to find a way to unite these fractured races into a force strong enough to withstand the ancient enemies that were now re-emerging. Humanity's ancient past, which they had once thought was a relic, was now the key to their survival. The Terans were not just the descendants of an ancient race, but also the inheritors of a legacy of power, knowledge, and a responsibility to stop the ancient war from destroying them all. The Terans would need to confront not just their own history, but the galaxy's history as well.